Welcome to the Mortgage and Mindset in Minutes podcast, and I'm your host, Tiffany Rose, where you'll get a little on mortgage and a lot on mindset. Hi, everybody. This is Tiffany Rose with Guild Mortgage, and I'm doing this video summit for CEOs of wealth and health, trying to make sure we get through everybody finding their purpose, staying balanced, finding out what people did right, did wrong to their climb to success for their wealth and health. So I am so honored that I got Brian Hale. He is the CEO and founder of Mortgage Advisory Partners, and I've been lucky enough to work with him in the past, and he's agreed to do this interview and to share his story. He has quite an amazing story, and it's inspiring for all of us to hear. So thank you so much, Brian, for agreeing to be a part of this.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
So before we get into what you do at Mortgage Advisory Partners, I want to hear again as a refresher, because I heard your story in the past, and like I said, it was very inspiring. So I know that everybody has a reason, whether it's the underdog advantage or maybe their parent pushed them to fail as many times, a week as possible. Everybody has a backstory on how they got to this level of success that you are at. So what was your parents, your upbringing, that kind of like work ethic that they instilled in you? Can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. So, I had the good fortune to have what I've always considered to be the best parents in life, right? So I had two very hardworking parents who grew up, late in the Depression era and World War II, right? So this kind of the greatest generation type approach. And I had two very different parents in that I had a mom who was valedictorian of her high school class, graduated from high school at 15 years old. At a time when women didn't go to college, she graduated from college, was a star athlete, a little bit of a hellraiser, and very smart through the process. I had a dad, on the other hand, who also was very smart, just kind of in a different way, in a very pragmatic street level way. Never graduated from high school because at the ripe age of 15 and a half, he had his parents lie for him, which a lot of people did during World War II. And in 1942, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. And at 16 and a half years old, was in the U.S. Navy, stationed in all places, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on a minesweeper. And if you don't know what a minesweeper was, that's the little boat that they didn't put any money in that went in front of the important boats, so that when they hit mines, they blew up that boat instead of the good boats behind them. And so, kind of a tough upbringing. So 16 and a half years old, he's in the U.S. Navy sailing the Atlantic Ocean, and then was involved in D-Day as part of that later in the war. So, that obviously formed my parents' view of the world in many ways. And in both cases, I just had remarkably tough, hardworking, pragmatic parents who, growing up, told me that I could do anything I wanted to do, and told me that nobody owed me a thing. Right? So if I was going to get something, I had to go get it. And my mother used to tell me all the time, if somebody asks you if you can do something, say yes and figure it out on the way. Right? And so that's driven me a little bit through life. And then the work ethic, my dad was a union carpenter. And so he worked with his back his entire life. And he always used to tell me, look, you're going to grow up and do something in life, get an education, and don't have to work with your back the way he did. He was a hardworking, tough nut construction worker that was a great dad, and gave me a lot of my views on my work ethic, a lot of views on how to treat people. He used to say all the time, you have to be able to be successful from the bar room to the boardroom, right, and be able to deal with people all along that spectrum. And so I actually get a little emotional talking about this. You're a good therapist.
You should be very proud, and I understand why you're emotional over that, because that is, not everybody has the great fortune to have parents like that and to be exposed to all of those things that just catapults you into your climb to success and happiness in life. And you are very fortunate. So I see why.
Who taught me to street fight by putting on a lacrosse helmet and using lacrosse gloves and fighting with me. So he was a frag, because he was a construction worker guy and swung a 20-ounce framing hammer his whole life. He had these arms that looked like Popeye arms after he ate the spinach, right? And so when he hit you, trust me, you went down. And so it's a little bit of, my dad was a show how, tell how kind of guy. And so if he was showing you how, I can remember my mother picking me up off the floor a couple of times in a couple of those lessons, yelling at my father, Raymond, I think you killed him, kind of.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like you, I mean, between mom and dad, you had different but equally important, I always say, like, I'm street smart, I'm not book smart, but it looks like you had both, which is.
My mom ran a corporation of doctors for 30 years, of all these different doctors that formed a medical corporation. And she managed that for them for many years. Super smart, could do a lot of different things in life, was a great singer in the choir, spoke multiple languages, did a variety of things. And so, yeah, I had very different and at the same time, very common parents.
I wanted to touch on something you said, and I don't want to throw you too off track, but it's very interesting. Do you agree that the way the world was back then is so different for kids now? And my grandfather fought in the war, and my mom said, Tiff, I don't understand kids these days. At like 19, 20 years old, my dad was on the back of a warplane shooting at people, fighting for his country. And now these kids, they don't want to study further. They don't feel like doing this or that. They don't want to get their driver's license because they don't feel like driving. So do you feel like there's just such a huge difference with kids these days versus then?
The environment's different, right? Between social media, expectations, participation trophies, that kind of stuff. And by the way, my kids got participation trophies. They were hockey players, football players, all-state football players in Texas. Did a lot of different sports and different things. And the culture there, like a culture in a lot of places where, everybody got the 14th place ribbon and, that kind of stuff. I never really bought it, but, it was what it was. I have the good fortune that I have a couple of millennial sons that are in their early 30s who have great work ethics, who have been really successful in life. And so I think the environment's different, but it doesn't necessarily mean the outcomes have to be different, right, in the process. So
yeah,
I see that, and occasionally, look, I've had a lot of millennials who work with me and for me who have just been fabulous to have as employees, and were highly motivated, super smart. They're all better educated than I am, and never allowed that to change the fact that they understood they had to work hard to be successful in life.
Yeah.
That said, things are obviously very different. Look, when I was 10 years old, my mother, we lived across the street from a river in upstate New York. And the thing to do then when you were 10 in the town I grew up in, which was a very small little town, was to take an inflated inner tube all the way up to the hydroelectric dam, jump in the river, ride the tube 6 miles down to the mouth of the river onto Lake Champlain in northern New York, and then hitchhike back to the town at 10 years old. If you allowed your son to do that today at 10 years old, you'd be arrested.
Yeah.
Right? For child endangerment, abandonment, all kinds of stuff.
You're absolutely right. My mom and my uncle used to ride with the milkman around to all those milk deliveries, and then they just get dropped off by him at the end of the day.
I had this. This will sound like I was born in the 1800s. I had an uncle who actually was also a carpenter in the carpenters union with my father, but he was also a trapper, and so I worked a trap line with him. In the winter, on snowshoes. I had a dad who was, great deer hunter, and goes all the way back in my family, where in the Adirondack Mountains in New York, I had a great uncle who was known as one of the 7 great Adirondack guides. And so my dad came from that kind of culture. And so we would winter bivouac in on snowshoes and stay in for a week at a time at 10 degrees with snow and a tent and deer hunt for, 6-7 days. And so you really get to know each other, when you're in there. In fact, my dad, tragically, when his father passed away at a very young age, was in a hunting camp, and my dad literally had to carry him out on snowshoes after he had passed away. And so, these things kind of form you in life. They form how you see life. And I think they allow you to recognize when you've been fortunate, which is, my case.
Yeah. And I told you guys there's quite a story here. It's beautiful. So fast forwarding to what you're doing, not even now, but when earlier in your career, because you've been the CEO of multiple companies, how do you feel that you took your talents and your gifts, or did you feel like you had talents and gifts that you applied to get into the business, into the mortgage business, and so on?
I don't know about the talents part. I think I'm a pretty good salesman, and I think I'm a pretty good recruiter. I've had the good fortune to be a top originator in the industry, to have done a lot of early. I started as a loan officer trainee, and I can remember my first week on the job in the early '80s. I came back to my then boss and said, a realtor today asked me about FHA loans. What is an FHA loan? Right. That was like my first week on the job. I had no idea. First of all, what does FHA stand for? Right. That was my first question.
Yeah.
I could figure, because in the old days, here's a rate sheet, here's a box of business cards, go get them.
I can relate.
Go get them, right? And so I think I had a capacity to study and learn. I've had this great fortune in my life to have 5 or 6 really impactful mentors that came along just right, timing wise, in my life, took an interest in me, or situationally just happened to be there. And so the very first guy in the mortgage business was a guy by the name of Mike Legault, who's still floating around, but he's not in the business anymore. And he was like the top originator in the industry for a lot of years, out of this little bitty town in mid-Wisconsin kind of thing, right? We're a town of a couple 100,000 people, and he was doing 700 transactions a year kind of. And so when he hired me into the business as a trainee, he had about 6 months to do nothing but spend every day with me and teaching me his approach, and literally how he spoke to people, to realtors and others in the process. And so I learned a great deal from him, and was able to memorize that stuff, memorize the pitch and the approach. But also, he introduced me to this great motivational speaker by the name of Joe Gandolfo. And this won't mean anything to your audience, but Joe Gandolfo at one time was the #1 life insurance salesperson in the United States. He was just, and he used to speak with Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. He'd go out and do these seminars. And Mike had a tape of Joe Gandolfo delivering a speech in Kansas City one time, like a 45-minute, videotape. In the old days when you had the big VHS tapes. And we used to watch it like every morning before we go out and make sales calls, just to get, fired up and motivated. And that's actually where the 10 Beans story came from, right?
Oh, yes. So can you tell me about the 10 Beans story? Can you repeat it?
This approach, which was, Mike had a view of, he had this little thing written up of, to make 10 sales calls a day, you do 2 sales meetings a week, you do this every day, you do it religiously, you return phone calls. These were prior to the days of cell phones. You'll sense how old I am, where you had pagers, right? And you get back to people quickly, and you do it over and over again, and it'll equal to 1 application a day, 5 applications a week, 20 applications a month, mean 18 closings a month, means making it as a loan officer. I still have that in my head. I can see it. You ask me if I have talents or gifts. I probably have one gift that I think I inherited from my mother, which is I have a near totally photographic memory. And so if I see something or read something, I can see it in my head years later. Always have been able to do that. And I can read up. So when I would walk up to a realtor's office and they had a sales contract laying on their desk, I could read the sales contract upside down and get the customer's name right through the process. So those are handy things, as you know, as an originator, right?
Yeah.
So this 10 Bean story came from this Joe Gandolfo tape. And Gandolfo, of course, was an orphan, grew up in an orphanage, never had anything in life. Was a very religious guy, used to get on his knees and pray about, the future. And what he figured out is that he could just simply outwork people. And he had a certain approach to it, which is know everything about your business, right? Be smarter than the next guy or gal, right, in the process. And so the 10 Bean story came from Gandolfo, which is he used to teach new insurance agents this 10 Bean story, which was you had to make 10 cold sales calls a day. Now, much has changed in our business, social media, posting, podcasts, right? All kinds of things. All those things I think have been really additive in many ways to our business. But when I see people failing in the business and sales today, it's almost always a resistance to outbounding meeting new clients, new opportunities, new referral sources,
Yes.
because the fear of rejection just tends to overwhelm people, right? It's hard to be told no. It's hard to be told, I don't trust. Because when a realtor says to you, no, I'm not interested in doing business with you or taking a meeting with you, what they're really saying is, I don't trust you. Next month's commission, right? I don't trust you with my ability to feed my family. And that's if you internalize that, it can be pretty devastating, right? You don't trust me. And so I always saw it as a challenge. And one of the things Mike shared with me was, how to overcome and build trust and do things for people before you ever ask them for a transaction. How do you load up the ability to have people owe you a transaction, right? As a salesperson, by giving, and then asking, right? Through the product. A lot of people show up and ask, right? Right away without ever having provided any value to their client.
Right.
So the bean story is very simple. Gandolfo's view was, you put 10 raw beans in your pocket, your left pocket, every time you make a cold call, or you call on a client, or you call on somebody new, you take one bean out, you put it in your right pocket, and don't freaking go home until you have all 10 beans in your right pocket.
Yeah. Back to basics.
Really back to basics, right? And it was just that, even if you were wildly successful, and look, I had periods in my life in the early 80s where I was closing 80 to 100 transactions a month as an originator, as a producing branch manager. I was being pretty successful. I still made 10 calls a day. This thing stuck, just outbounding, because occasionally I had to fire a referral source because they were abusive to my people, to my processors, to my team, to, whatever the case may be. Or I determined, I'm not doing business with you anymore because I don't like your attitude, right? Or, whatever the case may be. And so the ability to fire a great referral source came from the fact that I always had a line of new referral sources coming in, right? You only had 10 referral sources and you start firing 3 of them, all of a sudden your business is shrinking down and now you're not eating, right, in the process. But if you're constantly developing new sources, and there's other ways to do it today, whether it's social media, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's, speaking. One of the things I did early in my career as an originator, and did this for many years, even as a regional vice president, I became a certified instructor in the states that I operated in for continuing education for the realtors. I built a set of classes. And so where I grew up in the business in New Hampshire as an originator, realtors had to go get, I think, don't hold me to this, but it might have been 6 hours or 7 hours. I think it was 7 hours of continuing education every year to maintain their license. And what they would do is they go to the local community college and take appraisal 101 for the 14th time. It cost them $395. It was, brain damaging, wasn't very interesting, wasn't anything they could actually use, right?
Yeah.
But credit, and they'd file it with the state and renew their license. So what I did is I built an 8-hour course on how to use financing to sell more real estate. And I charged people $19.95 at the door. I gave them a probably not great buffet lunch. I had fabulous door prizes like a camera or something else, right, in the deal.
Wow.
On in, and I would start literally I've got one somewhere. I would start with my business card, because remember, not social media then. And I would do this and walk around the seminar with my business card stuck to my forehead. And the reason was that on every piece of paper I handed out in the course, down at the bottom, it basically said, if you don't remember anything I taught you during the course of this course, remember one thing: call Brian Hale. Now that might sound goofy, but I would have 400 realtors in the room for $19.95, for the course. And think about it. How many sales calls would you have to make as an originator to spend 8 hours with 400 realtors?
Yes.
Hours of FaceTime.
Very many.
You were the authority. It's like 2,800 sales calls. You couldn't make, I got the equivalent done in a day, right? And so, people to this day, run into occasionally go, man, I came to one of your seminars in Manchester, New Hampshire in like 1983. And that stuff is stuck, and what really stuck was call my pager.
Yeah.
Couldn't calculate, many of them didn't know how to calculate a down payment or, whatever, or how does MI come off, or all that stuff that I trained them on.
Yeah.
They got their 7 hours of continuing ed.
Yeah.
They got their license, and they got the other thing: call Brian Hale and establish the authority to that many agents at a time. And that probably, as much as anything, launched my career right through the process.
Jeez. And I love when you get those validations.
And look, and I tell this story and people go, Jesus, that looks really obvious. Yes, except, I've had originators who've worked for me through the years. Alan Pozeskian is a great example.
Yeah.
Alan was a $1 billion a year originator when nobody was doing 500 million, right? And we had originators in his branch that couldn't break 8 million a year in volume. And everybody wanted to be like Alan until they realized the kind of discipline that he drove his business with. And the people say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, okay, well then you can't want without paying the price.
You mentioned something, it was a song, Everybody Wants to Go to Heaven. What's the rest of it?
I could grab it off my wall. I actually have that's how old I am. I have a 45 record with a picture of the record cover. And the name of it's a great blues song. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And
how do you take that and apply that to people's business ethic?
I have that on a plaque in my office over the top of the door when I left every day when I was a branch manager. And what it told me was, are you willing to pay the price, right? And what it really means is everybody wants things in life. Most people either don't understand the price that it takes, or once they're explained the price that it takes, you know what, that sounds hard. I had a guy work for me in Chicago years ago as a top producer in the company. And we had him on a panel one time at like a President's Club kind of deal, right? We had top producers explaining how they run their day, that kind of thing. And people were listening to Mike. His name's Mike Monaco, brilliant guy. Mike was up there talking about it. And this is a guy that literally joined the mortgage business from the back of a beer truck. He used to deliver beer kegs, right? Kind of thing. Tough guy, South, North Chicago boy, kind of born and raised. And he starts his presentation by saying, well, I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm in the gym by 4:15. I work out till about 5:15. Shower, wake up my family. Boom, I'm in the office by like 6. I focus on my files till like 9. I start making sales calls at 9. I make sales calls to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Boom, I do this. I take applications in the middle, and I do it 7 days a week. And people were like, I don't want to do that.
No.
Okay, then you're probably not, unless you're really lucky, you're probably not going to have the same level of success. But by the way, one of the things I learned from Gandolfo was, success is not about how you define success or somebody else defines success. It's only about how you personally define success.
Yeah.
Getting up at 9 in the morning and having breakfast with your family and getting to the office by about 11 and working until like 4 in the afternoon and doing whatever that allows you to do is success in your life.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be measured by somebody else, but you also generally can't achieve ending success without paying a dear price somewhere in your life. I've always thought the big lie wasn't about an election. The big lie was you can have it all.
Yeah.
But you can't. And you just have to decide what you're going to trade and how you're going to balance things in life. I'm also not a believer personally, and I'm, my health probably the testimony to this, that I'm not sure that work-life balance is achievable in super high performing enterprises, but you need to be cognizant of it and make sure that you get to the right things in life. It doesn't have to be a 50-50 balance in order for you to still feel like you've done the right things across your entire life, your kids, your wife, your families, that kind of thing.
And that was going to be one of my questions to you, which I'm so glad you brought that up, is I've heard so many people, successful individuals say, you can have it all. You can be balanced. And man, I try like heck. And every day I just feel I'm a little off balance here. I'm a lot off balance here. So people
that are selling, good help books or something like that, or seminars on how to have it all. Look, I'm sure there are people who have it all. They're obviously more talented and can organize their life better than I can. I just grant that. I don't, I've really, in my life, at least in my business life, really never tried to compare myself to others because frankly, I just don't care.
Mhm.
I don't care what somebody else is doing. I don't care what people say about me. I never have. If somebody is, way better at it than I am, actually, I admire them. And what I try to do is figure out, is there something I can learn from him or her and bring it into my life and then disregard the pieces that don't really work for me in the process. And so part of it is, I think people who have this maniacal desire to have it all have been sold by Madison Avenue that you can have it all. I just, here's the problem. There's a physics problem. You have 24 hours a day and you have 7 days a week. And if you're going to spend whatever, is important in your life, your family, your work, your religion, your hobbies, athletics, your physicality, whatever that is, you're going to have to decide how you divvy up those hours. And generally, how you divvy them up is going to determine how you're doing in each of those areas. And look, I'm the first to say that, I haven't been balanced. I'm more balanced now, but that probably has to do with a little bit of net worth, that maybe as much as anything.
Yeah.
And I'm older now, so I probably don't have the same resilience or speed that I once had in terms of working nonstop. Literally, when I was an originator early in my career, I would work 40 hours in a row, go home and shower, put another suit on, go back to work.
Yeah.
I highly recommend against doing that.
Yeah.
It's not good. By the way, I've got, a divorce in my life, early in my life, that could validate that. And so I don't recommend that, but it also launched my career. When I got divorced, my business won because that's where I spent my time and effort, right?
Yeah.
Inside. And so I'm not much of one for looking back and having regrets. I'm sure I have some, as the song says.
What do you feel you learned about why health is so important and why so many successful people say, get up in the morning, do your gym workout, Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, I mean, they all have the same.
They're all right. And that's clearly should be the case. Look, I was a pretty good athlete early in my life. And so I went to college on a lacrosse scholarship. And so, I'm a believer in athletics. And at the same time, people ask me if I'm a golfer, and I go, well, I own clubs. It doesn't make you a golfer. I played on my high school golf team, liked golf, and then I went to work. And then I played what I call corporate golf, where I played 4 times a year on some nice course at some event or realtor function or whatever. It's not exactly how you get good at golf, by the way, other than learn how to, throw a club for distance and swear, right? That's the other advantage. And so I believe all those things. It wasn't that's not the path I took. Do I regret it health-wise now? Yeah, probably, because I've had some health challenges. Look, to answer your question of, what lessons did I learn in there, is when I was about, trying to think, about early 50s, I nearly died. It was kind of post-Countrywide, and, my health was just terrible. And, part of that was in the last probably 18 months of Countrywide, I don't think I took a day off or an hour off, to be honest. I'm sure my wife could validate that. And the stress was, unbelievable. And I had, 17,000 indirect reports at the time that I felt responsible for. And so, what I learned then from a doctor is actually a family friend. One of the doctors my mother ran the corporation for, he kind of gave me this. I'm sure you've seen this thing where people put rocks in a jug, then they put smaller rocks and then really small rocks and then sand.
Yep.
And the metaphor is that you can only fit so many big things in your life, right, in the process. And it's how you balance those things that matter. And so I got healthier, post that, realized that impact, I weigh 100 pounds less than I used to weigh. And some of that was just fear and being scared. I went, real quick, small side story, at Countrywide, we had this great medical benefit plan where once a year I could either go to Mayo Clinic or to Cooper in Dallas and do a check-in kind of week-long physical kind of thing. And I never did it. Why? I was too busy. At least that's what I told myself. Probably more that I was, was afraid of the answers. And so when we all got done, I was out for a couple of years. And of course, as part of my severance deal, they continued that for 3 years. So now I'm sitting on the back porch of my house. What's your excuse now, right? You don't have time.
Yeah.
All you have is time, right? And so I finally went. And so I went to Cooper in Dallas, and they do this unbelievable checkup, and they assign you this great doctor, and they sit down with you as a team at the end and explain their findings, right? And the doctor had told me early on, he assumed because of my weight, my history, blood pressure, I was a type 2 diabetic at the time. I'm no longer had a surgery, made that go away. But he says, look, I'm just going to tell you up front, you're probably going to need a stent or something with the heart and the pipes. And they did a test, a heart scan to determine that. To my wife's great frustration, I got a 0 score, meaning there was 0 blockages, 0 plaque. Now that probably has to do with heredity more than in luck than anything else. The doctor sits me down at the end. He goes, look, because you're like finding a classic car in an old barn somewhere. The good news is your engine, your heart, it's in really great shape. The body, on the other hand, really screwed up. Right? You got a lot to work on, right? And kind of gave me this whole list that I went out and started working on it and got better and off and running. So I don't recommend that. And at the same time, as I reflect back, I'm not sure how I could have done it any other way. So I beat myself up for it, but I'm not sure what value that is either.
Your health without your health, without anybody's health, for people listening, you can't do anything. The climb to success, there will be sacrifices, as he's giving us examples on. But I have to give you a lot of credit though on something, because you obviously getting to the level that you're at, especially being a CEO of Countrywide during the mortgage crash of 2008 and so on, you have to give yourself credit that you must know how to manage stress or take a step back. And you mentioned something when I talked to you a couple of weeks ago briefly. You said that you've always been able to, and I wrote it down because I feel like I have this and I need to tap into it more. You're able to kind of step away and compartmentalize a situation. Can you just elaborate on that? Because that is part of the reason.
Before I do that, though, I have to have you clear up one thing, and you got to make sure this makes it into the edit. I was not the CEO of Countrywide. Angela would be very offended by that. And there were others ahead of me. What I was the president and senior managing director of the largest division of Countrywide.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to make sure I don't, people.
No. Okay.
I didn't promote myself in the course of your podcast.
Okay.
But that said, to your point, look, I've always had, I'm sure this is both a plus and a minus, and I'm sure if you talk to my family, they validate this, is a pretty good ability to both compartmentalize parts of my life and or work issues, and the ability to focus to the derivation of everything else. Now, the negative on the focus part is when I'm focused at work, I'm sure somewhere in the last 5 days, my wife has said to me, so you're working, you're not walking as much as you used to, right? So things tend to fall away to some degree. That's the negative, is the things falling away part. The positive is it allows me to get a hell of a lot of stuff done. I also, for about 25 years of my life, I suffered from insomnia. And for a workaholic, insomnia is a gift. I used to have this saying that I would say to people all the time that, sleeping is what you do when you're dead. And so I had, this guy, Mike, who was my earliest mentor. He was a non-sleep guy. And so you can get a lot of work done if you don't sleep, except that really it wreaks havoc on your body, right?
I need my sleep. I can't. I have to get at least 7 hours is just a gift. And then I'm back at it the next day.
25 years, I was a 3 to 5 hour a night guy, right?
Wow.
So I get emails from me at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was up, right, on stuff. And so, and a lot of that, by the way, had to do with my health and other things that were keeping me from doing that. I've conquered that now, and that's great. But point being is, really big things. When I took the job at Countrywide, you mentioned Countrywide, the division had about 1,500 people in it and was doing about $1 billion a month, somewhere in that range. And at the end, we were doing $12 billion a month and had call centers and countless joint ventures and an awful lot of employees. And that effort is like a moon rocket shot, where most of the effort is expended early on, right, to get it going. Mm-hmm. And so it's the balance thing, the compartmentalization thing, and the dealing with stress. I would tell you that I felt like I dealt with stress well. Others would tell you I probably dealt with it less well than I thought I did, meaning that it showed up other places in my life, showed up in my health occasionally, and or how I dealt with people in that environment, in the countrywide environment. There's a little bit of a gladiator environment corporately, meaning that, people would take, no one held back at the corporate level. If somebody wanted to tell you something, they would tell you, and it would leave a bruise, right?
Yeah.
In the process. I don't recommend that for anybody. And people have certainly been in a room with me where I've made the furniture orbit for a couple of minutes by being frustrated because somebody lied to me or, wasn't prepared or was, whatever the case may be. I could clearly twist off. Again, I don't recommend it to anybody. I think that was actually some of the detriment, because in that kind of an environment, people are unwilling to tell you the bad news. And as a leader, there's this great Attila the Hun story. It might be too graphic for your listeners there. And I don't even know if it's true, but towards the end, Attila was eventually surrounded and wiped out. And early on, he used to have these messengers would ride from the front of the battle to his tent every day and report on the battle for the day. And if the things were going well, the rider got food and wine and women, and it was great. And then they'd ride back the next day. If the rider showed up with bad news, they were often killed, hollowed out, stuffed with sand, tied to their horse, and sent back to the front. Pretty soon, the only news Attila was getting was, "How's the day going?" Great. Oh,
Yeah.
Where's the wine? Right? It's only getting good news. And look, anybody can find good news. It's the bad news you need, right? That's the stuff you really got to focus on. And so the compartmentalization came as being able to focus on work, but also to be with my kids and sports and those kinds of things, or my family. And then frankly, it didn't leave a lot else in my life, because just back to the 24/7 thing.
Yeah.
You run out of hours and the clock starts again.
I'm so glad that you're talking about all these things, because operating at the high level that you do for so many years, I want people listening to understand the struggles. You could look at someone and say, "Oh, they're wealthy, they have it all, things come easy to them." It didn't. It takes hard work, constantly getting unbalanced and trying to rebalance, getting off balance and just getting back on it again. And I think the realness to your story is so important for people to hear that are trying to climb that ladder to success, and really highlighting how important whatever that success means to you, whatever that wealth means. When's the point where you're like, okay, I'm good over here, now I need to focus my attention elsewhere. So hearing your story, it's not discouraging. It's very like, I'm taking what I know. Okay, yes, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this. And you're making me feel like I'm not as hard, shouldn't be so hard on myself, because I'm very hard on myself. And I feel like if he can do it, I should be able to do it. And so
look, first of all, when you see other people accomplishing things, you don't always know the whole story, right?
Yeah.
Maybe paying a terrible price some other place, or they may have been part of the Lucky Sperm Club and been born into wherever they are, or there's a number of those examples in our industry. And by the way, there's just a whole bunch of people that are way smarter and better and faster at it than I am. And so I've always tried to also identify those people and say, look, I admire that person for what they've accomplished or what they know or how they've done it or how maybe they have better balance in their life than I do. And can I learn something from them? But I really haven't beat myself up about, well, I'm not as good as him or her or whatever the case may be. I've always just believed, this also came from my dad, you only can do what you can do. And
Yeah.
I had other mentors in my life that used to tell me, look, the only right answer is the right answer. And it's not, you can't look for these things that are mystical and mythical. And, Tony Robbins sells a lot of tapes and books. I think, I've been to his seminars and, he fires me up and gets me excited and all those kinds of things, except that, if you look at his early part of his life, and he talks about it, right, in his life, immense number of struggles before he ever became a success in doing what he's doing. And by the way, he fires me up and gets me excited and all those kinds of things, except that, if you look at his early part of his life, and he talks about it, right, in his life, immense number of struggles before he ever became a success in doing what he's doing. And by the way, there's a lot of glitz and glamour wrapped around, an image wrapped around him and others like him. That doesn't mean he's a negative or not, legit. Just means you never really know.
Never really know. Yeah, when I see them do the ice dunks in the morning to get up, like, oh, I can't. I don't care. I don't, if I have to be a millionaire and do that, I'm not doing it.
Okay. Where I grew up was really kind of cold climate, and to be a real kind of man when you were a teenage boy, when the lake began to thaw, was to walk out on the edge of the ice and dive in the water in the open water part while the ice was still in the lake. And so, that'll toughen you up. It's also the definition of stupid.
I heard it's really good for you, but I'm sorry. That's one of the things that's just not on my list of
That's
to-dos
why
for the day.
I don't have to shovel the weather, right? So yeah, cold.
So I feel like I kind of want to bring it back because I want to also talk about purpose. I had to get really clear in the last maybe 10 years. I've been doing this business since telemarketing, found a great mentor that brought me into the mortgage industry. And I was so grateful because I don't think I was on the best path. I wasn't in college and didn't feel like studying anymore. And I got into this loan business, but I got into it to make money and to have a career. Now I'm realizing it's my soul journey. I've learned so much about myself, dealing with conflict, putting my best foot forward, teaching my kids great work ethic and how to constantly find that balance and realize what's important in my life. I did not just fall into this mortgage industry. I feel like higher, whatever you want to, universe, God, being the best version of myself. I landed here for a reason. Do you feel like this is part of your journey, that you're living out your purpose with your work?
I think first of all, I think I fell backwards into the business. I got recruited. I mentioned to you, I went through a divorce very early in my life. I've been married to my wife, Pamela, for going to 36 years now. And so we both made a mistake early in life and ended up divorced. But when I was married the first time, we decided to buy a house, went and I met this guy, Mike Legault that I was talking about. He actually took my loan application. And through the course of that, I was working for a finance company, an old company called Household Finance. And
I remember.
I was a branch manager making, $10,000 a year. And Mike basically said to me in the course of the process, look, once we get your house closed, do you ever think about being in the mortgage business? Guys like you tend to do pretty well over here. And I didn't really know what he meant by guys like me, but I knew credit and understood, some of the lingo and that kind of stuff. And somebody who's willing to knock on doors and collect money and repossess puppies, because I used to finance a pet store.
Mhm.
He thought it was probably tough enough for the mortgage business. And so he convinced me to do it and come in as a loan officer trainee for 18 grand a year, right? Kind of thing. It was a big raise for me. But it was just a pittance compared to what I was able to go forward on. Long and short of that is that I don't know that, I grew up, everybody I know, everybody I graduated from high school with, all of my relatives, my brother, are all prison guards in the state of New York. I had a cousin who was the warden of Attica, right? My sister-in-law was a nurse at the prison, the toughest maximum security prison in the state of New York. I'm a social criminologist by education. That's what I expected to do in life, was to become a prison guard or a state cop or a federal cop or, whatever. So everything after that, I've seen as upside, right? And I've just been immensely fortunate and lucky to, in many ways, find my way into this career. And as you know, when you take applications for people, you see what everybody else, all of the other industries and professions make.
Yeah.
Never have found anything that remotely compares to the mortgage business, where people have a tendency to pay us more than we could possibly be worth to society. If you compare it to a brain surgeon or, whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I looked at that and thought, wow, man, have I been lucky to find this thing? And I seem to have certain skills at it that have, helped me do well at it through my life. But I don't know that it's been a calling as much as I do believe that if you look at, and I don't know that I can tabulate this number, the amount of mortgages that I've been responsible for in the United States through the years, both as an originator and then as a regional and a divisional and a national head of production and a president and a CEO and others. And I've had the good fortune to run the largest retail operation in the industry, the largest wholesale operation in the industry, the largest joint venture operations in the industry. So I've made, through those efforts, a lot of people have gotten mortgages. And some people, throw stones at me about Countrywide. Well, you screwed up the world, whatever. Okay, sure. You want to have that conversation? Let's go offline for 8 hours. I'll be glad.
Oh, yeah. We could get into that. That's another podcast.
That said, even if you take the worst of the map, millions of people got a home as a result of the efforts of me and people that worked with me.
Yes.
Here's people like you, the mortgage industry in general. And so I don't genuflect or have a lot of mea culpas for that part of the process, right? Back in the 2007, 8, 9, 10 era, remember that no regulator was standing up, no congressman or senator was standing up, right? The Dodd-Frank law, great. Senator Dodd got a mortgage from Countrywide, right? So, there were no virgins involved then, period. That said, my wife has often asked me, why don't I do something different, right? Different industry, whatever. And I look at it differently, which is I've got 40 plus years of experience that I can now help. And it's what I do in my consultancy. I mentor a number of CEOs, work with a number of companies, both, some of the top 5 companies, public companies that I've been involved in, large independents, medium-sized independents, small independents, mortgage brokers, builders who have mortgage companies, realtors who have mortgage companies. I have all those as clients, and I'm able to give back. By the way, I don't do it for free, but I'm able to give back some of that expertise and knowledge that I've gained, mostly by knowledge that I've gained by hitting my head on the low-hanging pipe, right? And I can yell duck, right, for somebody who's going through that same path.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that it's been a calling for me. There's been times in my career that I wonder, I must have committed some heinous crime in a previous life. And then as a penance, I was sentenced to be a mortgage banker in this life.
Yeah.
I must have wiped out like 3 civilizations maybe or something. I don't know what happened.
You know what, Brian, it can feel like that sometimes in this industry. I actually had to write on my whiteboard, this business is tactical, not emotional, because telling a client certain, like you were talking about the bad news earlier, it's heavy on my heart, and it's stressful, and it's all these sorts of things. But, I had to get really clear that I'm doing the best I can at my job, and I'm doing a damn good job at it, and realizing that I'm putting a roof over people's head where they raise their families and where they hold holidays. And once I got really clear on what I'm doing, it took that load off, like the stress of being in the mortgage industry. And honestly, my business doubled. I think maybe even tripled at this point, once I realized that it may not have been a calling, as you were saying, but for me, the purpose behind it and what I'm actually doing, I got really clear about it, and it's become fun for me now. But it does have its stressful times. I agree with you 100%.
Look, I'll tell you a very quick story. I'll go very fast. Everybody wants to take a shot at Angelo, right? From my days. But most people don't know this, that, early on in Countrywide days, any loan that was turned down, particularly by a minority applicant, Angelo used to want to be brought to his desk, and he'd review them and argue with the underwriter and try to find a way to do the transaction. And this is way early on, it was just a couple of branches and that kind of stuff. And he had the fortune, and I'll get parts of the story wrong, but I'll get it directionally correct. In his office, towards the end, he had this like bound book on his coffee table in his office that was sent to him by a customer who he helped early in his career in life in East LA. And she happened to be a minority single mom who raised a couple kids. And she was able to get this house when houses in East LA were selling for $100,000, right? Today, that same house is like $700,000, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Got this mortgage done, and she kept a journal for the rest of her life of living in that house. And she put both of her kids through college by taking equity loans against that house as the house appreciated through the years. She always had kind of low menial jobs, but was able, and she had pictures of her kids growing up, pictures of her kids graduating from school. Don't hold me to this, but if my memory's right, one was a doctor and the other was a lawyer, went off in their life. She sent this to him as a thank you.
Wow.
What else do you need?
Yeah. And that's what was so sad about the crash of 2008 was it was no one leader's fault. It was also, we
Millions,
can't even,
millions of people got a house as a result of that company,
yeah,
and some of it didn't work out. And there are, by the way, if somebody wants to talk about lessons learned,
yeah.
let's go in a room for 8 hours with some flipboard type stuff, and I'll be glad to give you, I could give you, 40 lessons learned.
I'll tell you,
The process.
I was calling phone numbers from my clients trying to find out, hey, how's your NAGAM loan going? And numbers were disconnected. Back then, everyone used landlines still. Numbers were disconnected. I couldn't get a hold of my clients. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is going on? What did I do? What did we as an industry do? And it was huge lesson for me to help my clients and be a better loan agent and be a better real estate investor. I think I was 25 years old. I had 8 houses. I lived in a $1.2 or $1.3 million house in my mid-20s. And I thought I was just the best real estate investor ever, best mortgage lender. And I'll tell you, I wasn't. But it wasn't that I was trying to do any harm. I was always trying to do the best for myself, my family, my clients, but we just didn't know any better. So we learned a huge amount.
Of the top 20 companies in the industry today, many of them are run by ex-executives from that team.
Well, I'm sure you've been surrounded by a lot of great leaders, but you are an amazing leader. And I have been privileged to work with you at Stearns Lending. And even when I'd make the top of the charts, you're like a celebrity in, a lot of ways to me, and such an inspiration. And you would actually take the time to send me an email and say, hey, great job. I see you at the top of the list. Those extra little things you do, you are making an impact on your employees, and you are someone that is a very highly respected leader, especially in my eyes. So I love what you're doing for the world. You may be a little hard on yourself, but you're reminding me not to be so hard on myself either. And for mortgage advisory,
the only advantage you have of getting older is you get a little perspective on life, right? So I'm a lot older than you are. So maybe I have some additional perspective, which is, winning is, you're never probably as good as you think you are when you're winning, and you're never as bad as you think you are when you're losing, right? And so, figuring out that balance and realizing that what people say about you just could not be less important in life.
Yeah.
Comparing yourself to others, not that helpful, right? It's really about your path, your success. How do you measure it? How do you think about it? And if you do what you want to do in life, who cares?
What's the quote? I always get quotes wrong, but I think this one is, it's none of your business what other people say about you, right?
That's right.
So tell us really quickly, and then I know you have a million things to do today and this week. So tell me very quickly, how are you serving the world, the community through Mortgage Advisory Partners right now?
Well, I don't know about the world part. Look, one of the
You're too humble.
Yeah, one of the advantages I have. So look, what Mortgage Advisory Partners is just a consultancy. It actually fell backwards into this, to be honest with you. I had people start reaching out to me after William Lyon Homes sold to Taylor Morrison. I was going to be done. And then of course, COVID hit. So we closed the Taylor Morrison acquisition of William Lyon in February of 20. COVID hit in March.
Yeah.
Most people don't know this about me, but I could give Howard Hughes hermit lessons. So when the world said you have to stay home and see nobody, I was like, all right, this is great. And so I started getting phone calls with people that were looking for some help, and I discovered Zoom, right? I just teleconferencing for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I figured out that I could help people and not have to go see them or shake hands with them because of COVID. And not that otherwise I would want to do that. And so I started getting these calls and started agreeing to helping people and mentoring folks and doing different things. And then I realized there's actually a business here. And I think the industry is evolving to much more of an outsource model. And so one of the things I do is I give people an opportunity to outsource certain problems that they have that maybe I can help them with. I also provide executive search and recruiting. I have 18 million-ish people in my LinkedIn community. I have, 2,800 contacts in my Rolodex, mostly in the mortgage business. And I can generally get to almost anybody in the business. I can get them on the phone. And so as I engage with people on a variety of topics, a lot of times challenges that companies have are the fact that the leader in a particular area, maybe the business has outgrown the leader's capability. They're still very good, but they're just not the leader at the scale they are today. I'm able to help people find really talented executives to come in to help. I have some partner advisors that I work with that bring immense skill sets in offshoring and fulfillment operations and in HR, benefit, comp design, just kind of the entire aspect of the business. We have folks that can, PR. We all saw in the last 2 weeks a CEO of a company that was a disruptor operator type have a video call and lay off 900 people, and he's no longer there in that chair. That's how bad he was prepared for this. And so I have people that are associated with me as part of Mortgage Advisory Partners that have helped coach some of the biggest companies in the country, executives on communication, on doing well, those kinds of video calls. You'll remember I've done some of those that you've been participants on.
Yeah.
They're immensely difficult. They're way harder to do than they look.
Yeah.
So we provide advisory services. In addition to that, as I dividend up out of the company into my personal financials, Pam and I have a philanthropic fund that we donate and contribute to, and then provide community investment in a variety of different ways through that as well. And so one of the things I shouldn't say this on this podcast, I'm thinking about doing is, look, the mortgage industry is one of the few industries that has done really well in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Result of COVID, interest rates came down and boom, right? We had 2 of the best years ever in the history of the industry. Myself included in terms of starting this business in the last 18 months. And so I was going to write a check to Feed America and challenge the rest of the industry to take some of the great earnings we've all made and help those who haven't done as well.
Give back.
Process.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I love what you're doing. And I almost called you Mr. Hale again, but you said it makes you sound older than you are. So Brian, again, it was an honor. And I know that this message reaching so many people is going to help in who knows how many different ways, but definitely a lot. So I appreciate you being a part of this.
Well, look, first of all, it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you today, Tiffany. You were, fabulous when we worked together, and it's the only negative about the advisory business that I have is that I don't have employees and associates that I work with every day. But the good news is in the advisory business, I'm inside a lot of other companies and still have an opportunity. It's one of the things I really take value in what I do for a living now, is being able to be involved with really great talents like yourself. And I'm glad I could help today, and don't ever hesitate to reach out, as always.
Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you everybody for watching, listening, and I hope this message helped. Take care.
My best.